Winter arrived early that year, as if the world itself had decided she should learn the taste of cold before learning anything else. Snow pressed against the roofs like a judgment, heavy and unyielding, sealing the village beneath a pale silence. Smoke curled weakly from chimneys, thinning as it rose, and even the church bell rang as though ashamed of its own sound. It was a season that stripped things down to their truth, and for her, truth had always been cruel. They spoke her name only when they needed an example of what not to become. At the market, women leaned close to one another, voices low but eyes sharp, measuring her shape as if it were a public offense. Men did not insult her openly, that would have required courage. Instead, they laughed after she passed, the sound brief and careless, like snow shaken from a sleeve. She walked with her head bowed, not from humility but from practice, for she had learned early that looking up invited comment. Her body arrived in a room before her courage did. It was soft where the world demanded angles, slow where it rewarded haste, and marked by years of apology. Every step through the village felt like a trespass, as though she were taking up space that belonged to someone better suited for it. Even the dogs knew her, their noses lifting when she passed, sensing weakness, sensing difference. Home was no refuge. The house crouched at the edge of the village like a thing half abandoned, its stones sweating cold, its windows clouded with years of disappointment. Inside, the air smelled of boiled roots and resentment. Her mother stood at the hearth, thin as a blade, hands red from scrubbing, eyes sharpened by disappointment that had nowhere left to go. "You were seen again," her mother said without turning. Standing there like a spectacle. She removed her gloves slowly, fingers stiff, knuckles aching. "I only went for bread." Her mother laughed, short and bitter. "Bread does not require loitering. You enjoy being looked at, don't you? Enjoy being talked about." The word struck harder than any hand. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Defense had never saved her. Silence, at least, shortened the blows. Her mother turned then, gaze sweeping her from head to foot, pausing where it always did. "Look at you," she said. "Winter has nothing on you. You grow larger while our prospects grow smaller." She felt the heat rise in her face, felt shame bloom where warmth should have been. "I cannot help how I am." "No," her mother snapped. "You can help it. You choose this. And now you expect me to pretend a man will overlook it?" The room seemed to shrink, walls inching closer, the ceiling lowering as if to press her down. She had heard these words before, in different shapes, but never so nakedly. Her heart thudded, heavy and uneven. "No one marries an obese girl," her mother said, finally, as if delivering a mercy. "Not in this village. Not in any." The sentence ended something. She felt it as a physical break, a quiet snapping inside her chest. Years of hope, small and stubborn, collapsed in that moment, leaving only a dull, ringing emptiness behind. She did not cry. Tears would have suggested there was something left to lose. Her mother's hand came next, sharp and sudden, striking her shoulder, then her arm, as though correcting a posture. "You shame me," she hissed. "You shame yourself." She stumbled back, catching herself on the table, the wood cold and unforgiving. The world narrowed to sound and sensation, the crackle of the fire, the rush of blood in her ears, the sting blooming across her skin. When her mother seized her coat and dragged her toward the door, she did not resist. Resistance would have implied entitlement. The door flew open, and Winter rushed in like a verdict. Snow spilled across the threshold, biting at her ankles, her breath fogging instantly. She was pushed forward, stumbled, and fell to her knees in the yard, the cold seeping through wool and bone alike. "Stay there," her mother said. "Think about what you are." The door slammed. The sound echoed once, then vanished beneath the snow. She knelt in the yard, hands sinking into the white, the cold sharp enough to burn. The sky hung low and gray, featureless, as though even heaven refused to look at her. Somewhere nearby, laughter carried from a neighboring house, warm and careless, a reminder that life continued elsewhere. For a long moment, she stayed exactly where she was, breath shallow, shoulders hunched. Then something inside her shifted, small but undeniable. It was not hope. It was not anger. It was the quiet realization that she could kneel forever and nothing would change. She pushed herself up, limbs trembling, and stepped into the road. Snow crunched beneath her boots, loud in the silence. Each step carried her farther from the house, farther from the voice that had defined her, though she knew distance alone could not erase words already lodged in her bones. The village lay ahead, muted and pale. Curtains twitched as she passed, eyes watching, measuring. Someone murmured her name. Someone else crossed themselves, as though her misfortune might be contagious. She walked on, spine bent not by submission but by exhaustion. At the edge of the village, where the road thinned and the forest began, she stopped. The trees stood dark and ancient, branches heavy with snow, their silence deeper than the village's. This was where the old stories lived, where children were warned not to wander, where footsteps sometimes sounded too heavy to belong to any man. She had heard the legends, of course. Everyone had. They were told in low voices by firelight, warnings disguised as entertainment. Beasts that walked like men. Kings without crowns. Eyes that glowed in the dark, watching, waiting. The Lycan. Some said he was a curse. Others, a protector. All agreed he was power, old and merciless. She had never believed such stories belonged to her life. Legends were for heroes and fools, not for women who could not even earn kindness in their own homes. A sound reached her then, low and deliberate. Not the snap of a branch, nor the skitter of an animal. Footsteps. Slow. Unhurried. Heavy enough to press the earth. She turned, heart stuttering. The road behind her lay empty, snow untouched, stretching back toward the village that had already forgotten her. Yet the sensation remained, unmistakable, the feeling of being seen not as an object of ridicule but as something noted. The air shifted, thickened. Her breath caught. She told herself it was fear, that humiliation had finally loosened her mind. Still, she did not move. Some instinct, older than reason, held her in place. From the edge of the forest, a shadow detached itself, tall and broad, its outline indistinct against the trees. It did not rush. It did not hide. It simply stood, as though the world had arranged itself around that presence without asking permission. She could not see his face, only the weight of him, the certainty. Snow seemed to hush beneath that gaze, the wind stilling as if to listen. For the first time that day, she felt something other than shame pressing against her chest. The figure did not speak. He did not step closer. Yet the silence between them carried a promise, or a threat, she could not yet tell. Her heart pounded, not with terror, but with a strange, aching awareness that this moment mattered. Behind her lay a village that had named her unworthy. Before her stood a darkness that did not laugh, did not turn away. Winter held its breath, and somewhere deep within the forest, something ancient had noticed her. At last, Snow remembered him before she did. It remembered the weight of his step, the way the ground answered without complaint, compressing rather than breaking. She felt it through her boots first, a subtle vibration traveling up her legs, settling in her chest like an unstruck bell. When she lifted her gaze, the figure at the forest's edge had not moved closer, yet the distance between them no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. She should have turned back. Any sensible woman would have fled toward the lights of the village, toward doors and witnesses and known cruelties. Instead, she stood rooted, breath clouding the air, staring into the dark where the trees gathered like conspirators. The shape among them remained still, broad-shouldered, cloaked in shadow, as if patience were a language he spoke fluently. Legends rose unbidden in her mind. The Lycan does not chase, the old men said. He waits. He lets fear come to him. Her hands trembled, not from cold alone. She tightened her fingers into her sleeves, feeling suddenly too exposed, too large, too human beneath that unseen gaze. I have nothing, she said aloud, voice thin and brittle. The words vanished into the snow, unanswered. Then he moved. Not toward her, but sideways, stepping fully into the pale light. He was dressed as a man, yet nothing about him belonged to the ordinary world. His coat was dark and heavy, cut simply, worn as though it answered to him rather than the other way around. His hair fell loose at his shoulders, darker than the forest behind him. His face was calm, carved into restraint, eyes reflecting winter like polished stone. He looked at her without flinching. She was accustomed to glances that slid away or lingered cruelly. This was neither. His attention settled on her as one might study a landscape after a storm, not judging the damage, only noting what remained standing. Heat crept into her cheeks, unwelcome and confusing. "I did not mean to trespass," she said, though she did not know why. "The road belonged to no one." "You did not," he replied. His voice was low, unhurried, carrying easily through the cold. It did not rise in threat or soften in false kindness. It simply existed, certain of being heard. Something in her chest loosened at the sound, then tightened again with caution. "You should return," she said. "This place is spoken of." "So are you," he answered. The words struck harder than the winter wind. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Only poorly." He did not deny it. Poorly spoken truths are still truths to those who speak them. Anger flared, sharp and brief. "Then why say it?" "Because I wish to hear how you would answer." She laughed, a short, incredulous sound. "You see what you wished. I am exactly as they say." For the first time, something flickered in his expression, not amusement but correction. He took a step closer, stopping well short of her space, enough that she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the silver threading his eyes. "No," he said quietly. "You are as they refuse to see." The sentence left her unsteady. Compliments had always been edged with mockery, kindness with conditions. This carried neither, and that frightened her more than cruelty ever had. Behind them, the village stirred. A door opened. A voice called. Someone noticed the road was not as empty as it should be. He turned his head slightly, listening, and she sensed it then, the awareness stretching beyond human range, beyond sight. When he looked back at her, decision had already been made. "Take this," he said, shrugging his coat from his shoulders. She recoiled instinctively. "I cannot." "You are cold." "I will manage." "You are bleeding," he corrected. She looked down, startled, seeing at last the dark stain spreading along her sleeve where her mother's ring had caught skin. Shame flooded her anew, hot and suffocating. He draped the coat around her anyway, careful, deliberate, as though the act carried weight. The fabric was warm, impossibly so, holding the heat of him. She inhaled before she could stop herself, scenting pine, smoke, something wild beneath. A gasp sounded from the road. She turned. 2 women stood frozen near the well, eyes wide, mouths parted. One crossed herself. The other whispered a name that did not belong to any man. The Lycan. Fear rippled outward, swift as spilled ink. Doors creaked open. Faces appeared in windows. A murmur rose, sharp and electric, fueled by centuries of warning. He did not react. He did not bare teeth or raise voice. He simply stood beside her, his presence an undeniable line drawn in the snow. "You should not be here," someone called. "She is nothing to you." His gaze lifted, meeting the speaker's without challenge or apology. "You are mistaken." The woman beside the well backed away. Others followed. Fear was easier to manage than curiosity. She stood trembling, wrapped in his coat, suddenly the center of a story she had never consented to tell. "You should go," she whispered. "They will not forget this." "Nor should they," he replied. From within his pocket, he withdrew a small object and pressed it into her palm. It was heavy, cold at first, then warming quickly. A ring, simple, engraved with a symbol she did not recognize, lines intersecting like paths converging. "What is this?" she asked. "A mark," he said. "Not of ownership. Of notice." Her fingers closed around it, pulse racing. "Why?" He studied her, really studied her, as though weighing a truth long held. "Because when they speak your name again, they will remember I looked back." A silence fell, thick and breathless. Snow drifted between them, slow and indifferent. He stepped away, retreating toward the trees without turning his back. The forest seemed to accept him, shadows bending, branches parting. Before he vanished entirely, he paused. "This world has already judged you," he said. "The next judgment will not be theirs." Then he was gone. She stood alone once more, but the cold no longer bit the same. Around her, the village whispered, fear and scandal tangling into something new. In her hand, the ring burned gently, and for the first time, she understood that being seen could be far more dangerous than being shamed. The knock came after nightfall, measured and deliberate, as though the hand that made it understood both patience and consequence. She had already barred the door, already banked the fire low, already told herself that the village would not dare send anyone after what had been witnessed. Still, the sound traveled straight through her, settling in her bones. She stood from her chair slowly, every instinct urging caution. The ring lay hidden beneath her shawl, its weight a quiet reminder that the day had not been a dream. Outside, the wind sighed through bare branches, carrying snow like ash. When she opened the door, he was there. Not looming, not threatening, but filling the narrow space with an undeniable gravity. Firelight spilled across him, softening the sharp planes of his face, drawing copper and gold from eyes that had seemed carved of stone in daylight. He removed his gloves before speaking, a gesture so human it nearly undid her. "You should not have come," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Nor should you have been left alone," he replied. She stepped aside without fully understanding why. The door closed behind him, shutting out the night, the latch clicking into place like a vow. For a moment they stood in silence, the fire crackling between them, its light painting him in flicker and shadow. "This is a mistake," she said. "Everything about this." He did not disagree. Mistakes are often truer than intentions. She laughed softly, bitter. "You speak as though truth is a kindness." "It is not," he said. "But it is cleaner than lies." She gestured toward the chair by the hearth, then sat opposite him, leaving space between them as though it were a rule. He remained standing for a moment longer, surveying the small room, the patched walls, the meager furnishings. There was no pity in his gaze, only acknowledgement. "Why are you here?" she asked at last. "To listen." The simplicity of the answer unsettled her. "There is nothing worth hearing." "That is not for you to decide." The fire shifted, sending sparks upward. She stared into it, watching embers flare and fade, gathering courage like one gathers warmth. "They say you are a beast," she said. "That you take what you want and leave ruin behind." "They also say you are unworthy of love," he answered evenly. "Do you believe everything said of you?" The question struck too close. She swallowed. "No." "Then extend me the same mercy." Silence returned, heavy but not hostile. She became acutely aware of her body, of how she occupied the chair, how the firelight caught the curves she had learned to hide. Habit urged her to fold inward, to apologize with posture alone. Instead, she forced herself still. "They taught me early," she said quietly, "that my shape was a warning. That it meant I had failed before I began. My mother, she believed it was her duty to correct me, as though hunger were a moral flaw." His jaw tightened, a subtle shift that did not escape her. "Correction that leaves scars is not duty," he said. "It is fear wearing authority." She nodded, surprised by the steadiness of her own breath. Every kindness was conditional. Every hope, mocked. "I learned to expect nothing, because expecting less hurts less." "And now?" he asked. "Now I do not know what to expect," she admitted. "That is the most frightening thing of all." He moved then, not closer, but to the hearth, extending his hands to the fire, palms open, as though warming himself in more ways than one. "I have lived a long time," he said. "Long enough to see how cruelty disguises itself as order. Long enough to recognize when someone survives not because they are weak, but because they are enduring." She studied his profile, the quiet power held in restraint. "Why me?" she asked again, softer this time. He considered the flames before answering. "Because when the world turned against you, you did not harden. You bent, but you did not break." That is not common. Tears pricked her eyes, unwelcome and sharp. She blinked them back. You saw me at my worst. I saw you at your most honest. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, snow thickened, blanketing the village in silence. Inside, something shifted, subtle but irrevocable. You must understand, she said, voice trembling despite her resolve. Your notice has made me a spectacle. They fear you. They will punish me for it. They already have, he said. What they threaten now is escalation, not origin. She looked down at her hands, thick fingers scarred by work and cold. I have no desire to be brave, she confessed. I am tired of being resilient. A shadow crossed his face, something like sorrow. Resilience is not a demand, he said. It is a truth that emerges when there is no other choice. He turned to face her fully then, meeting her gaze without hesitation. I did not come to claim you, he said. I came to offer you something rarer. And that is? A choice, he replied. Uncoerced. Unwatched. Her heart thudded painfully. What choice could there be? To remain as you are, within the boundaries they have set, he said, or to step beyond them, knowing the cost. The words settled between them, heavy with implication. She imagined the village's faces, the whispered threats, her mother's eyes. She imagined also the forest, the unknown, the dangerous possibility of being more than tolerated. I am afraid, she said simply. So am I, he answered, and the admission startled her more than any boast could have. She rose from her chair, drawn by something she could not name, stopping just short of him. If I choose to step beyond, she asked, will you stand beside me? He did not reach for her. He did not kneel or swear. He only inclined his head, a gesture of profound respect. I will not stand over you, he said. Nor behind you. Only beside, if invited. The firelight caught the ring beneath her shawl, a brief gleam of silver. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the door, reminding her that dawn would bring witnesses and consequences. She lifted her eyes to his, the question forming on her lips, knowing that once spoken, nothing would remain the same. Morning arrived wrapped in white, the kind of winter morning that made the village feel preserved rather than alive. Snow lay smooth and unbroken across the square, softening edges, disguising rot beneath beauty. Bells rang to call people outward, and they came, drawn by rumor more than ritual, coats pulled tight, mouths already shaping judgment. She walked among them with measured steps, the Lycan's coat returned to her shoulders by choice rather than necessity. It marked her now. Not as protected, but as noticed. Whispers followed her like drifting ash, brushing her ears, settling into the folds of her resolve. Some spoke her name with disbelief, others with pity, others with sharpened resentment, as though her very presence had become an insult. Her mother stood near the church steps, spine straight, chin lifted in practiced righteousness. When she saw her daughter approach, her lips thinned, eyes flashing not with relief, but with fury born of humiliation. She stepped forward, voice rising before the crowd could settle. You dare show yourself, she demanded. After dragging shame to this family? The square hushed, tension tightening like drawn wire. All eyes turned toward the woman who had learned to disappear, waiting to see if she would fold. She did not. I came because I was called, she said quietly, the words carrying farther than she expected. Called by whom? Her mother scoffed. By a monster? A stir rippled through the gathering at the word. Fear liked company, and it found it easily. Then the air changed. It was not dramatic, not sudden, but unmistakable, as though the world itself had shifted its weight. The Lycan stepped into the square from the road leading out of the forest, his presence drawing silence behind him like a wake. He wore no crown, no sigil of rank, yet the ground seemed to recognize him, the snow compressing beneath each deliberate step. No one spoke. No one moved. He stopped beside her, close enough that she felt warmth through layers of wool. He did not touch her. He did not need to. The line he drew was visible all the same. I called her, he said. His voice was calm, carrying without effort, settling into every corner of the square. It was not a challenge. It was a statement of fact. Her mother laughed, sharp and brittle. You call her? For what purpose? To make sport of what no man wants. The insult landed, heavy and public, meant to wound where it would be witnessed. Her chest tightened, old reflexes surging, the urge to shrink clawing at her spine. Before she could retreat, he spoke again. You speak of want as though it were authority, he said. It is not. Murmurs rose, uncertain, nervous. Someone crossed themselves. Someone else took a step back. She is unfit, her mother insisted, desperation cracking through the venom. She cannot offer what a man requires. The Lycan turned then, his gaze settling fully on the woman who had shaped cruelty into doctrine. There was no rage in his expression, no threat, only a clarity that stripped pretense bare. What you required of her was obedience, he said. What you offered was contempt. The words fell like a judgment long delayed. Her mother faltered, color draining from her face as eyes shifted, not away from her daughter, but toward her. This is none of your concern, she snapped weakly. She is, he replied. The square seemed to exhale as one. Shock rippled outward, colliding with fear, with fascination, with something dangerously close to awe. He turned back to her then, and for a heartbeat, the crowd ceased to exist. You may speak, he said softly. Her mouth went dry. This was the moment she had rehearsed in fragments through the night, the imagined versions never surviving contact with reality. She felt the weight of every gaze, the echo of every insult, the memory of snow burning her knees. She took a breath. They taught me I was less, she said, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. They taught me my body was a warning, my presence a burden. I believed them, because believing was easier than hoping. She paused, the silence attentive now rather than hostile. But I am done apologizing for existing. Her mother made a sound, half protest, half plea, but it was swallowed by the quiet. I did not ask to be born into their expectations, she continued. Nor did I consent to be shaped by their cruelty. The Lycan inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement that lent her words weight beyond her own. You shame us all, her mother whispered. No, the Lycan said evenly. She reveals you. A murmur of assent stirred, tentative but real. The village had fed on shame for so long it had forgotten how quickly it turned rancid. He stepped forward then, positioning himself fully between her and the crowd, not blocking her, but aligning with her. You fear me, he said, addressing them all. You fear what you do not control. That fear has taught you to wound those who cannot fight back. His gaze swept the square, pausing on faces both hostile and uncertain. Today, you will witness a different measure of strength. He turned to her, lowering his voice though it carried all the same. Will you stand here by choice, he asked. Her heart pounded. This was the crossing she had sensed by the firelight, the threshold that did not allow retreat without cost. She looked at her mother, at the woman who had mistaken dominance for love, and felt something loosen at last. She stepped forward. The movement was small, but its impact was not. Gasps rippled outward. Her mother staggered back as though struck. I stand, she said, lifting her chin, because I will not kneel again. The Lycan's expression softened, pride flickering through restraint. He reached then, not to claim, but to offer his arm. The gesture was formal, unmistakably public. She took it. Snow began to fall, fine and steady, cloaking the square in quiet. The village watched, stunned into stillness, as the two stood side by side, not bound by conquest, but by choice. This is not an ending, the Lycan said, his voice carrying over the hush. It is a beginning you will learn to remember. He led her away from the square, each step measured, unhurried, leaving behind a crowd grappling with the realization that the story they had written about her no longer belonged to them. Behind her, she did not look back, though she felt her mother's stare burning like frostbite. Ahead, the road curved toward the forest, and with it, consequences yet to be claimed. Snow softened the path as they entered the forest, each step sealing what the square had undone. The village noise faded behind them, replaced by breathing earth and wind threaded with pine. She felt fear loosen, not vanish, becoming something she could carry without shame. He walked beside her, not leading, not guarding, attentive to her pace. For the first time, her body felt permitted to exist. The forest did not judge weight or history. It accepted footprints equally, swallowing them gently, as if promising renewal while reminding both travelers that beginnings often demand courage from hearts learning to choose. At the cabin, firelight waited, steady and patient, as though it had known their return. He laid wood carefully, honoring silence, while she removed her coat and felt heat meet cold along her skin. When flames rose, they revealed truth without spectacle. He spoke first, not of power, but of restraint, of years spent mastering mercy so it would not curdle into cruelty. She listened, recognizing kinship and discipline learned too young. The ring warmed against her palm, answering the fire, asking whether choice could endure daylight beyond fear, rumor, and inherited limits set by others, long denied her, life. Night deepened, and with it came confession stripped of apology. She spoke of hunger mistaken for sin, of laughter learned as armor, of mirrors avoided because they repeated verdicts. He did not interrupt. When she faltered, he waited, granting space as reverently as shelter. Then he confessed his own burden, the loneliness of command, the exhaustion of being legend rather than man. Power, he said, isolates unless chosen shared. In that admission, her fear shifted, reshaped into understanding neither had expected, while embers sighed, time slowing to witness their courage, breathing warmth into wounds once hidden, named, forgiven, quietly, together. Dawn threatened the edges of night, pale and insistent. Outside, the forest exhaled mist, carrying their resolve outward. He asked nothing more, offering presence rather than promise. She considered the cost, the village's memory, her mother's silence like a blade waiting. Yet something within her stood taller. She spoke a vow to herself first, choosing dignity over safety. He answered by kneeling, not in submission, but in alignment, eyes level, oath implicit. The fire flared, sealing an accord forged without witnesses, as snow brightened, promising consequence, mercy, and futures earned by courage, patience, trust, endurance, truth, chosen together, at last. They returned by daylight, not to seek approval, but to conclude a chapter. The village gathered again, quieter now, measuring aftermath. He spoke briefly, naming boundaries, demanding no worship, only respect. She stood, shoulders open, receiving stares without shrinking. Her mother watched, small within her certainty, confronted by loss she had authored. No punishment followed, only absence, which cut deeper. The Lycan's hand hovered near hers, never claiming. Strength, she realized, could be gentle and still immovable when anchored by choice, compassion, memory, justice, and a future spoken aloud, shared, defended, daily, together, unafraid, enduring, beyond winter's reach, at last. Seasons turned. Snow loosened its hold, revealing earth unashamed of scars. She learned the weight of her voice, how it could steady rooms. He learned joy in listening, in being answered without fear. They did not rush ceremony. They practiced presence, walking borders, sharing meals, building trust as one builds shelter, plank by plank. When doubt surfaced, they named it. When gossip returned, it found no purchase. Love grew not as spectacle, but as habit, resilient and chosen, through weather, witness, work, forgiveness, laughter, patience, courage, and nights warmed by shared breath, steady purpose, mutual regard, growing, rooted, deep, true. Yet endings demand a reckoning. On the coldest evening of returning winter, her mother came, voice brittle, eyes searching for absolution. She listened, not yielding ground. Words were exchanged, careful, final. Forgiveness was offered without forgetting, a boundary set like stone. The Lycan watched from the doorway, respectful, present, allowing her authority. When the door closed, relief followed grief, a complicated freedom earned. She understood then that healing did not erase harm, it transformed response into strength, wisdom, patience, courage, agency, mercy, truth, and selfhood, owned, protected, expressed, sustained, daily, with care, resolve, clarity, hope, steady, kind, brave, alive, whole. Rumor faded into history, and history softened. Children learned different stories, ones with pauses for kindness. The forest remained, watching, approving quietly. She found joy in movement, in warmth, in being seen without measure. He found rest in shared nights, in laughter unguarded. Together they shaped a life neither had been promised, one built on consent and courage. When storms returned, they met them side by side, anchored by vows spoken and lived, through seasons, labor, listening, patience, honesty, joy, sorrow, balance, accountability, tenderness, strength, equality, mutual respect, trust, continuity, growth, grace, resilience, commitment, shared, enduring, chosen, freely, always, together. The Lycan's legend changed, stripped of fear, clothed in responsibility. Power learned to kneel without losing force. The village learned to look twice. She learned to claim space unapologetically, her body no longer an argument to win. On winter nights, firelight framed them, telling a story older than rumor. It said dignity survives when chosen, love endures when practiced. And beyond the trees, the world listened, recalibrating its measures quietly, as choices echoed, lives shifted, habits broke, kindness spread, courage multiplied, justice steadied, hope rooted, futures widened, hearts learned, seeing, naming, honoring, worth, everywhere, daily, again, renewed, alive, together, onward. Years later, when snow returned with familiar hush, she stood at the forest edge, unafraid. He joined her, silent as always, present as ever. They watched tracks appear and fade, a language of passage. She thought of the girl in the yard, of knees burning with cold, and felt gratitude tempered by resolve. Stories mattered, but choices mattered more. She reached for his hand, and the future answered with warmth, promise, challenge, labor, laughter, patience, and love, earned, practiced, protected, chosen, daily, openly, bravely, honestly, equally, together, forward, always, enduring, true, alive, grounded, strong, compassionate, resilient, unbroken, hopeful, whole, home. When asked who saved whom, she smiled and corrected gently. No one rescues a life alone. They witness it, stand beside it, choose it again. The answer unsettled those who preferred heroes. For her, the truth was simple: dignity is contagious when practiced publicly. Love grows where respect is disciplined. Winter can brand or bless. She had learned which required courage, and she never mistook the difference again, because memory taught her stakes, costs, consequences, accountability, mercy, patience, choice, agency, voice, presence, partnership, and commitment, lived, daily, without apology, fear, or retreat, ever, again, forward, together, freely, equal, strong, enduring. The night ended where it began, beneath falling snow, but nothing else matched before. He said, quietly, words meant for her alone, yet strong enough to hold a world. I am here, he promised, not as shield, but as witness. She answered by standing fully, no longer braced for impact. The forest accepted them. The fire remembered. And somewhere, a future took root, waiting, patient, certain, shaped by the courage to choose love over shame, while winter softened, dawn widened, paths opened, names healed, stories shifted, hearts steadied, vows endured, lives aligned, truth prevailed, hope remained, forward, together, always, home.